Hello everybody, this is the OU Weekly Matchup Show. The Sooners will try to get back into the winners column after losing to Baylor this past Saturday. It'll be Oklahoma versus Iowa State, Saturday, November 26th in Norman. And notice the early kickoff time, it'll be 11 a.m. and the game can be seen on FX. The Sooners are a massive favorite to win this game. But then again, Oklahoma was big favorites against Baylor and Texas Tech. And we saw what happened in those games. Yeah, pretty pathetic stuff. We'll talk a little bit more about the Iowa State-OU matchup in a second, but you notice that I highlighted this video, Will OU Care? And you're saying, why wouldn't they care? It's college football. Well, we bring that up because that really, to me and to a lot of Sooner fans, looks to be the case when this year they've lost games that they know they were the better team. Athletically, more talent, but mentally they didn't come ready. And that was evident in the Texas Tech and especially this past Saturday against Baylor. And you might say, well, Oklahoma had some defensive breakdowns and had issues there. I'm not saying they didn't. That was a good part of why Oklahoma lost. But you'd also have to admit, too, that the Sooners just didn't show really the firepower. And it's not to take anything away from Baylor and to take away from RG3's terrific effort for the Bears, but you could just tell from the beginning of that game that the Sooners just weren't really jacked up. And we've seen OU get jacked up. We've seen them emotionally ready. We saw that against Texas. We saw that against Kansas State coming off the week after that stunning loss to Texas Tech. Oklahoma bounced right back and really took care of things in Manhattan, especially in that third quarter. So we know Oklahoma's got it within them, and that's probably the most disappointing thing about this season. It's one of the most disappointing years Oklahoma's had when you consider not only the talent that they had, the expectations that they put on themselves. Even Travis Lewis said it himself, this is national championship or bust. He said that back in August. So if you take him for his word, it is a disappointment. Not only because of the fact that they were so highly ranked and that they had the talent, but also the fact that the opportunities on their schedule and with the BCS presenting themselves. Even after the Texas Tech loss, the Sooners found themselves back into the top 5, getting a second opportunity. And the night of the OU Baylor game, USC beats Oregon, so OU can move up even higher if they could just take care of Baylor. They didn't do it. So not once but twice did we see Oklahoma not being able to capitalize. And that's, to me, one of the most disappointing things I've witnessed with Oklahoma football. If you don't have the talent, if you don't have enough personnel, enough speed, enough strength to be able to beat the top teams in the country or even win games that some people might have given you a little too much credit for, maybe I can understand that. But the bottom line is that Texas Tech and Baylor does not have the 4- and 5-star talent that Oklahoma does. In the case of Baylor, that's true with the exception maybe of Robert Griffin III, who could play for anybody and make them a better team. We're talking about the entire picture, and for the Sooners to just absolutely fail to capitalize on the moment, an opportunity to at least get into the talk of the national championship after they blew it against Tech, and to see them blow it again against Baylor, completely inexcusable. Just completely inexcusable. Maybe it's arrogance. Maybe it's entitlement. Maybe it's just playing as a bunch of individuals. Probably all the above. The Sooners know now that the national championship is out of their reach. The Big 12 championship, however, is within their reach. But will OU care? Considering the expectations that they put on themselves to get to New Orleans January 9th for the national championship, and now that's out the window. Will Oklahoma be too dejected to not even care about the Big 12? And hopefully that's not the case. Because winning 7 Big 12 championships in a 12-year stretch is absolutely phenomenal. And you have an opportunity to win 8 in the last 13 years. You can win a share of it if you could beat Iowa State and if you could beat Oklahoma State. And you would get that tie-breaking nod to where you would get the automatic BCS bid for the Fiesta Bowl too. It could still be a year of fantastic memories. It could still be a year that, at least when you look back on it, you can say, well, we ended on a pretty high note. and we did all we could after the Baylor loss. Or you could say, man, oh man, after that Baylor game, it just continued to get worse. One or the other is going to happen. The Sooners lose out, meaning lose to Iowa State and Oklahoma State, probably looking at the Alamo Bowl. If you beat Iowa State but lose to Oklahoma State, probably looking at the Cotton Bowl. And Kansas State could possibly get a BCS bid, along with Oklahoma State, of course. If you can win out, naturally, you've got a automatic BCS bid in the Fiesta Bowl and still an opportunity to end the season with a ton of momentum. So there is still a lot to play for, but will OU care? That's the biggest question, because when they've cared, like we saw against Texas and Kansas State, they've come through. When they haven't cared as much or at all, we've seen that they're very, very vulnerable. Iowa State's going to come in feeling pretty good about themselves after beating an Oklahoma State team that was number 2 in the country and undefeated and had the Heisman frontrunner in Brandon Weeden. In one night, and I know the Oklahoma State had a lot on their mind, on their heart after the plane crash just hours prior, but I still can't take away from what Iowa State did that night. Iowa State took advantage of turnovers by Oklahoma State for the most part. They were able to get the thing in overtime, and I think the biggest thing Iowa State did in that game, they kept Oklahoma State's defense on the field for a lengthy period of time, and in double overtime, the Oklahoma State defense looked absolutely gassed. They were breathing heavy. They had their hands on their hips. They were tired. And Iowa State just kept running down the middle, over the middle, and what should have been short gains turned into lengthy ones, and Iowa State eventually put Oklahoma State away in that second overtime period. Iowa State naturally does not have the talent of Oklahoma State, but that night, the Cyclones defensively forced the turnovers. Offensively, were able to convert several times on third down, and the Cyclones got their crowd involved in the game. One of the biggest crowds I think ever to watch an Iowa State home game, and the Cyclones took full advantage of that Friday night. And by the way, that victory for them is their 6th of the year, second time in the past 3 years that Paul Rhodes has gotten Iowa State to bowl eligibility. The quarterback change that they made middle of the season, Steele Jantz was playing. Now they've got Jerry Barnett. Not as good of an arm as Jantz, but definitely has the athleticism. He's a added dimension because of his athleticism and because of the fact that he can get himself out of tight situations. Doesn't complete but maybe over half of his passes, but he does make things happen. And I think that's going to be key number 1, is the containment of the athleticism of Jerry Barnett. Oklahoma will have to be ready, especially after all the yardage that the secondary gave up last week. I think key number 2 to this game is going to be the turnover game. Last week we mentioned Iowa State forcing 5 turnovers against one of the best teams in the country in the takeaway giveaway department. So if Oklahoma State was vulnerable in that department, Oklahoma could be as well. Smart decisions by Landry Jones. Hold on to the ball. The weather on Saturday could be pretty messy, so it'll be more imperative than ever to keep both hands on the pigskin. Number 3, the penalties. Oklahoma had too many of them last week, about 100 yards worth of penalties. That killed some drives and also kept some Baylor drives going when OU was committing the penalties on defense. So get back to disciplined ball. Oklahoma's been pretty good at that for the most part this year, but last week against Baylor, they simply just were not. And number 4, don't let it come down to the fourth quarter. That's what Iowa State wants. Iowa State knows that they don't necessarily have to be leading entering the fourth quarter. They just have to be within striking distance like they were against Oklahoma State. You keep them hanging around, they're going to have the confidence that they can beat yet another team from the state of Oklahoma, and they would love nothing more than to have another major upset against an Oklahoma squad like they did against Oklahoma State just a few days ago. So don't let it come down to the fourth quarter, Oklahoma. Final thoughts on this game. I don't think there's any way Oklahoma covers the spread. I don't think the weather is going to be conducive enough for that because of the fact it's going to be high winds. It's probably going to be cold. Could be rainy as well. And plus the fact because we don't know which Oklahoma team is going to show up as well. They're at home on paper. You think they should win easily, but they don't play the thing on paper at all. Sooners are going to win because I do think they'll bounce back from the Baylor game. I just don't know in what fashion they'll do it. I don't know if it'll be a convincing one. So if I had to go one way or another, I'm going to say Iowa State covers that spread, but I'm going to say that Oklahoma wins the game, and I'm going to go I'm going to go 35-14. I'm going to say Oklahoma wins the game, but I don't think they cover that spread. 35-14 is my final prediction. And we will have my post game either Saturday or Sunday. It'll probably be Sunday, but I will have my post game on this very webpage. And don't forget, Oklahoma State will be on December the 3rd. Oklahoma, I'm picking them to win 35-14. Boomer Sooner.